At 17, my mom left me in the hospital alone because her boyfriend's needs came first. 10 years later, she reappeared. What if your own mother offered to abandon her long-term partner, your replacement, if you just paid her enough money? I never thought it would come to that, but when it did, I made sure her entire world came crashing down. I was 27, my back pressed against the cold, grimy linoleum floor under a kitchen sink in a duplex on Mayfield Avenue, the metallic tang of corroded pipes filling my nostrils. My wrench worked at a P-trap some genius had patched with electrical tape. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. Normally, I'd just let it go, between the endless warranty scammers and robo-dialers. Interrupting a job for a recorded voice about my car's expiring coverage just wasn't worth it. But the area code. 614, Columbus, Ohio. Her area code. That's where she'd lived for the last decade, with the same man she'd chosen over her own kid. I let it ring out, focusing on the P-trap. Finished the job, wiped my hands on my jeans, and then, on that cold floor, I checked the voicemail. It was her. Hey baby, it's Mom. I know it's been a while. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I really have. I wanted to hear your voice. Call me when you can. Okay. Love you. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, staring at the phone. Not because I was emotional, not because some buried part of me was crying out for mommy. I sat there because my brain was doing what it learned to do a long time ago, sizing up a threat before the body even thought to react. Like hearing a rattle in tall grass and knowing you don't move until you figure out exactly where that snake is. My mother hadn't called me in almost 10 years. Before this, the last real conversation we'd had was when I was 17, lying in my Uncle David's spare bedroom, still 20 pounds underweight from a hospital stay she never once showed up to. I was trying to figure out how to enroll in a trade program without a parent's signature because the one parent I had left couldn't be bothered. She didn't help with that either. Too busy telling her friends and her sister, Brenda, that I'd moved out because teenagers are just dramatic like that. That voicemail? That wasn't a mother missing her son. That was a setup. I just didn't know what for yet. The last time I needed my mom, I was 17, riding in the back of an ambulance, an oxygen mask on my face. She didn't even know it was happening. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Quick context. My dad left when I was 6. Not in that dramatic movie way, with a packed bag by the front door and a tearful scene. Nah, he just stopped coming home. 1 week he was there, eating dinner with us. The next, he wasn't. My mom told me he needed some space. At 6, I didn't fully get what that meant. I thought space was something astronauts needed. Years later, I found out he'd moved to Nevada with some woman he met online. He sent me a birthday card when I turned 8, with a $20 bill inside and no return address. That was the last I ever heard from him. So, it was just me and Mom. And look, I'll be fair, she wasn't evil back then. She definitely wasn't beating me or locking me in closets. She was just absent in this real specific way that's hard to explain to people who didn't grow up like that. She kept the lights on. There was usually food in the fridge. Rent got paid. But emotionally? I was furniture. I was the couch that was already in the apartment when she moved in, the one she never bothered to replace, but also never really thought about. She worked retail management at a big box store. Long shifts, bad hours, always came home tired and irritated. I learned early that needing things from her, attention, help with homework, a ride somewhere, was an inconvenience, not a priority. So, I adapted. I stopped asking for help with schoolwork by 3rd grade. Made my own lunches by 4th. By middle school, I was doing my own laundry, running my own schedule, basically living as a roommate who couldn't legally drive or sign a lease. Then came the boyfriends. One guy first, harmless but boring, lasted about a year. Then, Leo showed up when I was 15, and everything shifted. Leo wasn't abusive toward me. He didn't hit me, didn't threaten me, didn't even raise his voice. He was just this black hole that sucked up every ounce of my mom's already limited attention. Whatever scraps of mothering she'd been capable of before Leo. Gone. Anything Leo needed, Leo got. If Leo was tired, the house went silent. If Leo wanted the living room, I disappeared. If they were going out to eat, Nobody knocked on my door, and I figured out dinner on my own. And yeah, I was a teenager, but it was the principle. I wasn't even an afterthought. I was a leftover from a version of her life she was actively trying to upgrade away from. The thing is, neglect doesn't announce itself. There's no single moment where it starts. You just shrink until you're invisible. And then one day, something goes seriously wrong, and you find out exactly how invisible you really are. That day came in November, 3 months after I turned 17. Leo had been sick for about 2 weeks, some nasty respiratory infection tearing through his warehouse job. Half his crew was out with it at one point, deep cough, high fevers, the works. And my mom, who couldn't be bothered to ask me how school was going most days, suddenly turned into Florence Nightingale. Tissues, warm compresses, trips to the pharmacy, making him special food, the whole production. She even took 2 days off work to care for him, something I had literally never seen her do for another human being in my entire life, including me. I started feeling off on a Tuesday, sore throat, headache, body aches that felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I figured it was the same thing Leo had, which made sense since we were sharing a bathroom, and my mom wasn't exactly running any kind of quarantine. I told her that evening I wasn't feeling great. She barely looked up from the soup she was making for Leo. There's Tylenol in the bathroom cabinet. You're almost 18. Act like it. By Thursday, I couldn't keep food down. My fever was running so high I was soaking through my sheets at night, waking up shivering in a puddle of my own sweat. I knocked on her bedroom door around 9 p.m. Told her I thought I needed to see a doctor, for real, not just Tylenol and toughing it out. Leo was propped up in bed, watching some reality show. Mom looked at me, standing in the doorway, visibly shaking, and made a face like I'd just asked her to explain quantum physics. You probably just have what Leo has. Push fluids, get rest, and stop worrying. I can't take off more work this week. I already used my days. Friday, I couldn't stand up without the room spinning. Saturday morning, I woke up and my chest felt like someone had parked a truck on it. Every breath was shallow and wrong, like trying to breathe through a straw that someone was slowly pinching shut. I could hear Mom getting ready for work in the hallway. She'd picked up a Saturday shift to make up for the days she'd taken off for Leo. I tried calling out to her, but my voice barely carried past the door. She left without checking on me, didn't knock, didn't crack the door, just grabbed her keys and went. Leo was still in the house somewhere, but he'd taken his meds and passed out cold, the way he always did by mid-morning. I was alone in that house in every way that actually mattered. 17 years old, couldn't sit up without the room going sideways, chest rattling with every breath, and the 2 adults who lived under the same roof might as well have been on a different continent. I texted my mom from my bed because I physically couldn't make it down the hall. I can't breathe right. I think I need to go to the hospital. Her text back? Stop being dramatic. If you're really that worried, call the nurse hotline number on the fridge. I didn't call the nurse hotline. I called 911. The paramedics were there in 11 minutes. Leo didn't even wake up. The front door was unlocked, and they came straight to my room after I managed to tell the dispatcher which bedroom I was in. When the first guy checked my oxygen levels, he looked at his partner in a way that told me everything before anyone said a word. They got me on supplemental oxygen in the ambulance. I remember staring at the ceiling of that rig, thinking, nobody in that house even knows this is happening right now. Nobody did. Mom was ringing up customers at the store. Leo was knocked out on cold medicine 2 rooms away. The ambulance pulled out of that driveway, and not a single person in my life watched it leave. I was admitted with pneumonia, untreated for 5 days, because nobody bothered to take me to a doctor. The doctor told me another day or 2, and we'd have been talking about lung damage that doesn't go away. For antibiotics, supplemental oxygen, observation. Here's the part that never left my head. On day 2, a hospital social worker came by my room. Standard procedure when a minor gets admitted without a guardian. She asked where my parents were. I gave her my mom's number. Mom didn't pick up. She was still at work. And even after she got off, she didn't return the call. The social worker tried again later that day. No answer. Tried again the next morning, day 3. Mom finally answered and said she'd been meaning to come by, but was dealing with a lot at home. The social worker wrote every bit of it down. On day 5, a nurse came in to talk about discharge planning. She looked at the empty visitor's chair, the one nobody but David had sat in since I got admitted. "Is there someone who can pick you up when you're ready to go home?" I just looked at her. She wrote something on her clipboard and left without pushing it. Mom never came. Not once. Not in 7 days. Not a visit, not a phone call, not a text asking how I was doing. 7 days of her 17-year-old son in a hospital bed, and she was across town, splitting her time between work shifts and making soup for her boyfriend. Pause. Here's a quick thing most people don't realize. When a minor gets admitted without a guardian present, that social worker visit isn't just a courtesy check-in. It's a legal documentation event. Every unanswered call, every excuse Mom gave on day 3, went into a file with a case number. It got documented, it got filed, and once I turned 18, I had every right to request my own records. She was building my case for me, and she had no idea. Keep that in mind. Back to it. My Uncle David came through. On day 3, the hospital tracked him down through emergency contact records from my old pediatrician's files. David drove an hour and 45 minutes from outside Dayton. When he walked into that room and saw me hooked up 2 and 4, with nobody in the visitor's chair, something changed behind his eyes. He didn't give a speech. He pulled the chair up, sat down, and said 4 words, "I got you, kid." David handled the discharge paperwork, talked to the doctors about follow-up, and drove me back to Mom's place to grab my things. When she launched into it, I was going to come. I just couldn't leave Leo alone. He's still not 100%. David didn't argue. He just helped me carry 2 garbage bags of clothes and a backpack to his truck. Didn't even look at her. She called after us from the doorway. "You don't remember it, right? I didn't think it was that serious. You were almost grown. You could have driven yourself." I moved into David's spare bedroom that night. Mom didn't try to stop me. Didn't ask me to stay. Didn't even stand up from the couch when the door closed. She didn't call for 2 solid weeks. When she finally did, here's what she said. "I hope you're not going around telling people I abandoned you." That's not fair to me. I was doing the best I could with what I had. Leo needed me, too. You always hold on to the past instead of moving forward. I hung up. That was the last real conversation I had with my mother for close to a decade. Uncle David was a plumber. Not the kind you see in TV commercials with a clean van and a logo. This was real plumbing. Crawl spaces, frozen pipes at 6 a.m., backed up sewer lines that smelled like death warmed over. Hard, dirty work that nobody glamorizes. It saved my life. He got me into a pre-apprenticeship program 2 months after I moved in, co-signed the application since I was still 17, and basically replaced the parent I didn't have. I grabbed my GED since going back to regular school wasn't realistic, missed too much, behind on credits, still recovering. I kept my head down and worked like I was allergic to free time. Finished my apprenticeship at 21, got my journeyman card at 22 on the first try. David just nodded and said, "Good." I bought a used Ford Ranger for $3,000 and rented a studio apartment that was small, ugly, and entirely mine. None of it was cinematic. There were stretches where I ate rice and canned vegetables for weeks because work dried up, and I'd rather miss meals than miss my truck payment. But going backward meant being Mom's invisible kid again, and that wasn't happening. By 25, I had my own small operation, just me and a guy named Mark I'd met on a job site when we were both subbing for the same contractor. Residential plumbing, basic fixture work, some light remodeling, emergency calls. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every pipe joint, every invoice, every 5 a.m. alarm mine. I didn't think about Mom much during those years. Too busy building a life to sit around feeling sorry about the mother who never bothered to be one. The absence of her was the quietest my life had ever been. Quiet felt good. Then she called. That voicemail on Mayfield Avenue was just the opening move. Mom didn't come in aggressive, didn't come in demanding. She came in soft, gentle, patient, which should have been my first red flag because my mother has never been a patient woman about anything in her entire life. She called again 2 days later. I didn't answer. She left another voicemail, softer than the first. Then a text the next week. I understand if you need time. I'm not going anywhere. I just miss my son. A week after that, I saw something today that reminded me of you. Hope you're doing well, baby. 2 weeks later, I know I wasn't perfect. I've had a lot of time to think about things. I'll admit it, some dumb, stubborn part of me wanted to believe it was real. Not because I needed her, I'd proved I didn't. But there's this part of your brain that still wants your mom to be a mom, even when every piece of evidence screams she won't be. It's not rational. It's just wiring you can't fully cut, and, honestly, it's really hard to override. I didn't respond for 6 weeks, but I didn't block her either. That was my first mistake. After 6 weeks, I finally replied, one text short, I'm fine. What do you want? No question mark, because we both knew it wasn't really a question. She asked if we could get lunch, just to talk. No pressure, no expectation. We met at a diner on my side of town, my turf, my choice. She looked older, thinner. She hugged me when she saw me and held on way too long while I stood there like a fence post. We sat down, ordered food, and she launched into the performance. How proud she was of me. How she always knew I'd land on my feet. How she wasn't in a good place back then, but she's done so much growing since. She hit every note. I didn't think it was that serious at the time. You were so independent. I thought you were handling it. I was doing the best I could. She used the word growth 3 times in 10 minutes. I counted. I let her talk, didn't give her much back. Nodded at the right moments. Ate my food. I had a Reuben, which is a dumb detail, but I remember it because it was a really good Reuben. And I kept thinking about how weird it was to be eating a great sandwich across from a woman who once let me almost die. Anyway, I watched her eyes the way you watch someone's hands during a card trick, because the mouth is just the distraction. We did 3 more lunches over the next month. Each one, she'd press a little further into my world, asking about my business, my apartment, my truck. Was I seeing anyone? Warm, curious, motherly. If you squinted real hard and turned the lights down low. Then came lunch number 4, and the whole act fell apart. Halfway through her meal, she put her fork down and got quiet. A different kind of quiet. Calculated. She told me Leo was sick again. Really sick this time. Long-term respiratory damage from that original infection years ago. Complications. Needed ongoing treatment. Specialists. Her insurance wasn't covering everything. The bills were stacking up. She looked at me across that Formica table with an expression designed to look vulnerable, but I'd seen it before. The same face she used on her exes, on Leo, on anyone with a wallet and a pulse. I'm not asking for a lot, honey. Just some help while we get through this rough patch. You're doing so well for yourself, and family helps family. That's all I'm saying. Family helps family. She actually said that to me. About the same man she chose over her own child when that child was 17 years old and couldn't breathe. I told her no. Flat. Calm. That's not something I'm going to do. What happened next is the thing I'll never forget. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand, squeezed it, looked me dead in the eyes. What if I left him? What if I chose you this time? I'd leave Leo if it meant having my son back in my life. There it was. This wasn't a reunion. It was a negotiation. The most honest thing my mom had ever said to me, wrapped in the most manipulative package you can imagine. She wasn't offering to be my mother. She was offering to swap one meal ticket for another. The sick boyfriend for the successful son. I pulled my hand back, dropped enough cash on the table to cover both meals, stood up, and walked out of that diner without saying another word. I wasn't making a scene. I was just done. Pause. What if I chose you this time? Read that again. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't even pretending to feel guilt. She was literally offering to trade her sick boyfriend for her son's bank account. Like she was at a dealership, doing a trade-in on a car with a blown engine. And she thought that would work. Lady, your son fixes pipes for a living. He can tell when something stinks. Back to it. That should have been the end. But Mom doesn't accept no. She never has. Within 2 weeks of that last lunch, the pressure campaign started. First came texts from Aunt Brenda, your mother is really going through a hard time right now. I think you should reconsider helping her. Then calls from Amy, Mom's best friend of 20 years. Honey, she's been crying every single day. She just wants her family back together. Don't you think you're being a little hard on her? I found out through Brenda that Mom had been running a story. In her version, she'd been reaching out for months, trying to reconnect, and I'd been cold, heartless, and cruel. No mention of the hospital. No mention of 7 days. No mention of a decade of silence. Just an ungrateful son rejecting his struggling mother. She showed up at my apartment complex one afternoon, sat in her Camry in the parking lot for about an hour. Mark was over, helping me with some estimates, and noticed her through the window. "Who's the lady sitting in the Camry?" he asked. I looked out, my stomach tightened. Nobody I need to deal with right now. 2 weeks later, she showed up at a job site. Didn't talk to me. Instead, she talked to the next-door neighbor of the client whose bathroom I was working on, telling this total stranger she was just trying to find her son because she was worried about him. And he won't return her calls, and she doesn't know what she did wrong. That neighbor mentioned it to my client. My client looked at me the next day with an expression. Not hostile, just uncertain, like maybe I was the kind of guy who'd abandon his own mother while she suffered. That cost me a real awkward conversation where I had to explain enough of my personal history to a paying customer just to keep the job from getting weird. I hate that. I don't talk about my family because it's nobody's business. And here was Mom making it everybody's business from the outside. That was the moment I decided. I was done playing defense, done absorbing, done deflecting. It was time to play offense. Pause. What Mom was running here? It's textbook. In psychology, it's called a smear campaign. You control the story before the other person can speak, and you recruit people to pressure them on your behalf. Those people are called flying monkeys, and they genuinely think they're helping. The trick is, the whole thing only works as long as no one checks the receipts. And she had no clue what I'd been keeping in my filing cabinet. Back to it. Here's what Mom didn't account for. I'd been keeping records my whole adult life. Not because I was building some grand revenge plan. I kept them because when you grow up with a person who rewrites history as casually as other people change clothes, you learn real fast to write things down so nobody, including yourself, can ever be convinced it didn't happen. I had the hospital discharge paperwork from when I was 17. David's name on it as the responsible party. Mom's name? Nowhere. I had saved call logs from my old phone, showing every text to her that week, including the one where she told me to stop being dramatic. I had the social worker's case notes, which I'd formally requested from the hospital when I was 21. Those notes documented 3 separate attempts to contact my mother, and her response the next day, that she'd been meaning to come. I had every voicemail and text from the recent months, the sweet campaign, the lunch invitations, and the messages where she flat out asked for money and offered to leave Leo in exchange for my financial support. And I had a handwritten timeline in a composition notebook I'd been keeping since I was 18. Dates, facts, events. No opinions, just what happened and when. I spent a weekend organizing all of it. Printed screenshots, made copies of documents, put everything in a manila folder with a basic timeline on the front page. Clean, factual, no emotional language. Just, here's what happened, here's when, and here's the proof. Then I reached out to the people she'd weaponized. Aunt Brenda first. She was the most reasonable person in Mom's circle, and I had a gut feeling she genuinely didn't know the real story. I asked her to meet up. She agreed, probably expecting me to apologize. I told her up front, I wasn't asking her to pick sides. I just wanted her to see what actually happened before she decided I was the villain in Mom's version. Then I laid it all out. Hospital records, discharge paperwork with David's name and Mom's absence, social worker's notes, the text messages from when I was 17. Then the recent texts, the money ask, the offer to leave Leo for cash. Brenda went real quiet for a while. Then she said, she told me you left home because you were going through a rebellious phase. She said the hospital stay was just an overnight thing, and you were basically fine. I let that sit for a second. It was 7 days, Brenda. She didn't come once. I watched it click in real time. Every story Mom had spun over the last decade. Every time she'd played the long-suffering mother of a cold, difficult son. Brenda was running the math on every single one of them right there at that table. Amy was harder. 20 years of friendship is a lot of weight to move, but I gave her the same treatment. Not a rant, not a guilt trip, just the timeline and the documents. I told her the same thing I told Brenda. I'm not asking you to turn on her. I'm asking you to look at what's real. Receipts don't have feelings, and they don't have opinions. The texts from Mom asking for money were bad enough on their own. But the offer to leave her sick boyfriend if I'd pay up instead? That was the part that made Amy set her jaw and go completely silent. Then I did the thing my mom never in a million years expected. I went to see Leo. Leo and I had never had a real conversation in my life. To him, I was the sullen teenager in the back bedroom who didn't make eye contact. To me, he was the guy who replaced me in my own house. We lived in the same space for 2 years and barely exchanged 50 words. I drove to their apartment on a Wednesday. Actually, wait, might have been Thursday. Doesn't matter. I went when I knew Mom was at work. Knocked on the door. Leo opened it looking rough. Gaunt. Lost a lot of weight. He let me in mostly, I think, because he was too caught off guard to say no. I sat at his kitchen table and told him the truth. Not the hospital stuff, that was between me and Mom. I told him about the lunches, about my mother spending weeks buttering me up just to ask for money for his treatment. And then I told him the rest, that she looked me dead in the eyes across a diner table and offered to leave him, her partner of over 10 years, the man she was supposedly devoted to, if I'd pay up instead. Leo's whole body shifted. He leaned back in his chair, and his jaw got tight. Nah, no way. Your mother would never say that about me. We've been together over a decade, man. I've been right here. She wouldn't do that. He said it with a conviction that almost made me feel bad for what was about to happen. Almost. Because I recognized that voice. It was the same voice I used to have at 15, telling myself she cared, but just had a weird way of showing it. That voice runs out of material eventually. It always does. I didn't argue with him. Didn't try to convince him with words. I just unlocked my phone, pulled up the text thread, and slid it across the table, her exact words glowing on the screen, timestamps and all. Leo picked up the phone and read it. Then he read it again. Then he set it down real slow, like it was something hot, and stared at a spot on the table between us. His kitchen had this weird humming sound from the fridge, and it was the only noise in the room for what felt like forever. A decade of partnership. Whatever trust he'd built, whatever story he'd told himself about who my mom was and what she actually felt for him, it all cracked right there at that kitchen table under the fluorescent light. The man who just told me she would never was now sitting across from proof that she absolutely did. I didn't ask him to do anything. Didn't tell him how to feel. I just said, I figured you deserve to know what she says about you when she thinks it'll get her something. Then I stood up and left. Drove home. Went back to work. Pause. What I just did. That's the single most devastating move in this entire story, and I did it in under 10 minutes at a kitchen table. Every manipulator has one person whose loyalty they never question. That's their anchor. For Mom, it was Leo. The second Leo saw those texts, she lost the one relationship she assumed was permanent. And the best part? She handed me the texts herself over text on a phone with timestamps. Back to it. The fallout took about 2 weeks to start. And once it started, it didn't stop. Brenda called Mom directly and confronted her with everything I'd shown her. Brenda told me later that Mom cycled through every play in her handbook, denying it happened, saying it wasn't that big a deal, claiming I'd somehow faked hospital documents. But Brenda had held the originals in her hands. She'd seen the hospital letterhead, the social worker's handwritten notes, the carrier timestamps on the text messages. There was nothing to fake. Amy pulled back from Mom's life quietly. No big confrontation, no blow-up. She just stopped being available. Calls went to voicemail more often. Plans got canceled. The 20-year friendship developed a frost that Mom's usual charm couldn't melt no matter how hard she tried. Leo didn't leave right away, but something between them broke, something that wasn't going to heal. Mom called me about 3 weeks after my visit, screaming into my voicemail that I'd destroyed her relationship and poisoned everyone against her. Then the classic closer, "You're punishing me for something that happened 10 years ago. That's not fair." I didn't call back. Save the voicemail. One more entry for the file. Brenda started reaching out to Uncle David for the first time in years. They'd never been close, mostly because Mom had controlled the family story for so long. She'd always painted David as the weird, loner half-brother who'd put ideas in her son's head and turned him against her. Once Brenda actually talked to David and heard his side, the hospital, the discharge, the year he spent helping me get back on my feet, she realized he was the only adult in the whole family who'd actually done the right thing when it counted. They talk regularly now. David grumbles about it, but I can tell he likes it. The money pressure on Mom didn't go away. It just stopped being anyone else's problem. Without Brenda's sympathy checks, and Amy covering the occasional bill, and Leo treating her like a partner he could trust, Mom's whole support system fell apart. Not because I tore it down. Because I showed it the truth. And the truth was load-bearing. You pull that out from under the lies holding everything up, and the whole thing collapses on its own. My business didn't suffer. The homeowner who'd gotten Mom's parking lot story actually called me after I gave him a short, professional explanation. "Family stuff is complicated, man. You still do good work." He ended up referring me to his brother-in-law for a full bathroom remodel. Probably my best referral that year. David and I talked about everything one evening, sitting in lawn chairs on his back porch. He didn't congratulate me, didn't give me some speech. He just took a long pause, looked at the yard, and said, "You did what you had to do, and you did it clean." That meant more to me than any of the rest of it combined. Months passed. Life smoothed out. Mark and I landed our biggest job yet, a complete repipe for a property management company. I started a savings fund for a down payment on a house, a real house. The noise from Mom's world went quiet. Then, on a Saturday afternoon in early March, I pulled into my apartment complex after a supply run, and she was standing on my doorstep. No car in the lot, which meant somebody dropped her off, which meant she'd planned this. She looked smaller than the last time I'd seen her. Not just thinner. Smaller. Like all the stuff that had held her up, the stories, the allies, the loyal boyfriend, the version of events she'd sold to everyone, had come down piece by piece. And what was left was just this tired woman standing on concrete with nowhere left to go. She started talking before I even got to the top step. "Please, just hear me out. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes." Her voice was shaking. Not the controlled kind of shaking she used to do when she wanted sympathy from cashiers or coworkers. This was raw, unpolished. She looked like she'd been rehearsing this in somebody's car the whole way over and still wasn't ready. "Leo's gone. He moved out last week. Brenda won't talk to me. Amy won't even look at me at church anymore. I have nobody. Do you understand that? I have nobody left." I set my bags down on the step and just stood there. I know I messed up. I know that. I should have come to that hospital. I should have been there. And I wasn't. And I have to live with that. But I'm your mother. Doesn't that count for anything? Doesn't all those years count for something? Her chin was trembling, and she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm begging you. I am standing here begging my own son. I don't have anywhere else to go. I don't have anyone. You're all I have left. Please, I'll do whatever you want. I'll apologize in front of anyone. I'll say whatever you need me to say. Just don't shut me out. Please don't shut me out." She reached for my arm. I stepped back. "You ruined my life," she said, and the begging cracked into something harder underneath. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to see it. The thing under the tears. The same woman who told a 17-year-old to stop being dramatic while he was suffocating in the next room. "No. I told people what you did. What happened after that was between you and them. I'm your mother. You were my mother. And when I was 17 and couldn't breathe, you told me to stop being dramatic. So, I stopped needing you instead." She stood there for maybe a full minute, waiting for me to crack, to invite her inside, to give her the emotional scene she could turn into a fresh round of guilt and games. "I need you to leave," I said. "And I need you to not come back here. I'm telling you once, clearly, so there's no confusion. Next time you show up here or at one of my job sites, I call the police and have you trespassed. After that, I file for a protective order. I have everything documented. You know I do. She left. I went inside, put away my supplies, and started prepping materials for Monday's job. The kitchen faucet in Unit 3 of the fourplex had been dripping for a week, and it wasn't going to fix itself. Life doesn't owe you a cinematic ending. Sometimes the best revenge is just being the kind of person who handles things quietly, cleanly, and without needing anyone's permission to move on, especially not hers. I still wonder sometimes if Leo got his treatment sorted out. I don't have an answer for that one. I didn't raise my voice once. Didn't throw a punch. Didn't post her on social media. I just opened a manila folder, told the truth, and watched a decade of lies collapse under its own weight. That's not revenge. That's an audit. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to audit the truth in your own life, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments, do you think I handled this the right way, or was I too harsh? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.